The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the sound of thunder echoed across the small lakeside town. A cold wind swept through the trees as little Emma, barely 3 years old, wandered away from her mother, chasing after a bright red ball that had rolled toward the water. Nearby, Max, the family's loyal golden retriever, lifted his head from under the porch as if he sensed something was wrong. His sharp brown eyes followed Emma's small figure as she stumbled toward the edge of the lake. The ball floated just a few feet away, bobbing on the surface of the calm but deep water. Emma reached for it, leaning forward, her tiny shoes slipping on the wet grass. Within seconds, she lost her balance and fell into the cold water with a loud splash. Her frightened cry was swallowed by the wind. Inside the house, her mother Laura was on the phone, unaware that her little girl was fighting for her life. Max barked fiercely, his instincts ignited. Without hesitation, he raced toward the sound of the splash. His paws pounded the ground, and with one powerful leap, he dove straight into the icy water. The cold stung his skin, but Max didn't care. He could hear Emma's weak cries and the desperate splashing of her tiny hands. The lake was deeper than it looked, and the waves grew rougher as the storm picked up. Emma's small body was sinking. Her frightened eyes met Max's as he swam toward her, his powerful strokes cutting through the current. He grabbed her dress gently with his teeth, trying to pull her back to the surface. But the current was strong, and the weight of the water dragged them both down. For a terrifying moment, it seemed they would both disappear into the darkness below. On the shore, Laura ran out screaming, "Emma! Max!" Her heart pounded in her chest as she saw her daughter's red ball floating on the surface. The seconds felt like hours. Then, out of the churning water, Max's golden head emerged, struggling but determined. He had Emma clutched tightly in his jaws, holding her above the water as he paddled toward the shore with every ounce of strength left in him. Laura waded into the water, tears streaming down her face, calling their names over and over. When Max reached her, he pushed Emma forward with his nose, exhausted but refusing to let go. Laura grabbed her daughter's limp body and rushed her onto the grass. Emma wasn't breathing. Panic filled Laura's chest as she screamed for help, her trembling hands pressing against her child's chest, trying to remember what to do. Max circled beside them, whining softly, his fur dripping and his breathing heavy. Then, as if refusing to give up, he gently licked Emma's face again and again, nudging her cheek. Moments later, a cough escaped Emma's lips. Water poured from her mouth, followed by a weak cry. Laura sobbed uncontrollably, holding her baby close as Max collapsed beside them, too tired to move, but his tail wagging faintly in relief. When the paramedics arrived, they found a mother crying with joy, a baby breathing weakly in her arms, and a dog lying beside them like a silent guardian. Max had nearly drowned saving Emma, his lungs full of water, but he refused to let go until she was safe. At the hospital, the doctors called it a miracle. Emma made a full recovery, and Max, after a few days of rest and care, returned home with a hero's welcome. The townspeople came to see him, calling him the dog with a human heart. News channels covered the story, and millions online were moved to tears by the courage and love of a dog who didn't hesitate to risk everything for a child. That night, as Laura tucked Emma into bed, Max lay beside her, his eyes calm and proud. The rain had stopped, and a soft moonlight shone through the window. Emma reached out her tiny hand and placed it on Max's paw, whispering, "A thank you, Max." The story of Max became a reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs and love without limits. His act of courage showed the world that love, loyalty, and sacrifice are not taught. They are born from the purest part of the heart. And in that small lakeside town, everyone would forever remember the day a dog saved a baby from drowning, and in doing so, taught an entire world what. Rain returned to the small lakeside town a few weeks after the rescue, but this time it brought peace instead of fear. The storm that had nearly taken Emma's life now seemed like a distant memory. The whole town knew the name of Max, the golden retriever who had become a symbol of love, courage, and hope. People came from nearby villages just to see him, to touch his head, and to thank him for the miracle he had performed. But for Laura and Emma, Max was more than a hero. He was family, their guardian angel in fur. As days passed, Max began to change. He had always been strong and playful, but after the rescue, he seemed quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes he would sit by the lake for hours, staring at the water, as if remembering that terrible day. Laura often stood behind him, tears filling her eyes, whispering, "You saved my baby, Max. You saved my world." But Max's eyes carried a sadness she couldn't explain. Perhaps he still felt the weight of that cold water, or maybe he knew something no one else did. One afternoon, Emma played in the garden, laughing and running through the grass. Her small voice echoed with joy. "Come, Max, catch me," she shouted, her blonde hair bouncing in the sunlight. Max followed her slowly, his tail wagging but his step softer than before. He was older now, his fur losing its shine, but his heart was still full of love. He watched Emma as if she were the most precious thing in the world. As autumn came, Max grew weaker. Laura took him to the vet, hoping it was just age catching up to him. The vet sighed softly, saying Max's heart was tired, too tired. Laura's eyes filled with tears. She knew what that meant. That night, Max lay beside Emma's bed as he always did, his breathing slow and heavy. Emma placed her tiny hand on his paw and whispered, "Don't leave me, Max. Please don't go." He lifted his head one last time and gently licked her fingers. Then he rested his head on her blanket and drifted into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, the house was silent. Laura found Max still lying by Emma's bed, his eyes closed, his body still. She cried for hours, holding him close, whispering how much she loved him. Emma didn't fully understand, but she cried too, hugging his soft fur one last time. The whole town came to say goodbye to their hero. They buried Max under the old oak tree near the lake, the same lake where he had saved Emma's life. Years passed, and Emma grew up. Every year on the same day, she brought flowers to Max's grave and sat there for hours, telling him about her life, about school, friends, and dreams. Sometimes when the wind blew softly across the lake, she could almost feel his presence beside her. One evening as the sun set over the water, a golden light reflected across the lake. Emma stood there, now a young woman, and smiled through her tears. "I know you're still watching me, Max," she whispered. "You'll always be my hero." And in that moment, a gentle breeze brushed her cheek, like a familiar touch, full of warmth and love. Max was gone, but his spirit lived on in every heartbeat of the girl he had saved. The story of his bravery became more than a local tale. It became a legend, one that reminded everyone that love doesn't die. It simply changes form, finding new ways to protect the ones it cherishes forever. Years had passed since Max's death, and Emma was now a grown woman, strong, kind, and full of life. But no matter how much time went by, she never forgot the golden retriever who had given his life for her. Every time she looked at the lake, she could still see him, his golden fur glistening in the sun, his gentle eyes watching her with love. The world had moved on, but for Emma, Max's memory was as alive as ever. One morning, Emma decided to visit the old house by the lake, the place where she had almost lost her life and where her guardian angel had saved her. The house was quiet and surrounded by tall grass, the wooden porch slightly broken from years of rain and wind. She walked to the edge of the lake where the water shimmered softly in the early light. Kneeling down, she touched the surface with her hand and whispered, "Max, I'm still here because of you." Her voice trembled with emotion. Suddenly, she felt something cold and gentle brush against her hand, a soft ripple in the water, almost like a touch. For a second, she thought it was just the wind, but deep inside, she felt something familiar. She smiled through tears, whispering, "I know, that's you." The air around her grew calm, and a feeling of warmth filled her heart, as if Max's spirit had returned to comfort her once again. Later that evening, Emma found an old photograph of her and Max together. She was just a baby in it, smiling with her tiny hands in his fur. The photo had faded with time, but their bond looked eternal. She decided to open a small animal rescue center in Max's memory, naming it a Max's Haven. It became a place where injured and abandoned dogs found care, love, and a second chance at life. The townspeople supported her dream, remembering the story of the dog who had once saved a child. Within months, Max's Haven was full of life, barking, laughter, and love. Emma spent every day with the animals, treating each one as if it carried a part of Max's spirit. There was one puppy in particular, golden, playful, with eyes just like Max's. Emma felt an instant connection. She named him a Hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat outside the shelter with Hope resting his head on her lap. The lake shimmered in the distance, peaceful and golden. She whispered softly, "You sent him to me, didn't you, Max?" The puppy looked up at her and wagged his tail as if answering yes. Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of love, gratitude, and peace. She finally understood that love never truly ends. It transforms, it finds new ways to reach us. Max had saved her once from drowning in the water, and now, even after his death, he had saved her again, this time from drowning in her grief. That night, the moon reflected on the lake like silver glass, and for a brief moment, Emma thought she saw a golden silhouette standing by the water's edge, watching her, proud and at peace. She smiled and whispered, "Good night, Max. I'll keep your love alive forever." And as the wind whispered through the trees, it sounded almost like a gentle bark, one final promise that love, once given, never fades. Years later, the story of Max had become more than a memory. It had become a legend that inspired hundreds of people. Max's Haven had grown into one of the most loved animal shelters in the region, saving countless lives. Emma, now in her early 30s, had dedicated her entire heart to helping animals in need. Every rescued dog reminded her of Max, brave, loyal, and full of unconditional love. But deep inside, there was still an emptiness that no one could fill. One quiet evening, Emma sat by the lake where everything had begun. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She closed her eyes and remembered the day Max had saved her, the feeling of his fur, the warmth of his presence, and the sound of his bark echoing through the storm. Tears slowly filled her eyes. "You gave me life, Max," she whispered. "I wish I could tell you how much you changed the world." As the days went on, Emma started writing a book, a heartfelt story about Max's bravery, their bond, and how one dog's love created a chain of kindness that never ended. She titled it "Of the Heart That Saved Me." Every word she wrote felt like she was talking to Max again. The book became her way of keeping him alive, not just in her heart, but in the hearts of everyone who would read it. When the book was finally published, it spread far beyond her small town. People from around the world read Max's story, and thousands of letters began arriving at Max's Haven. People shared how the story made them cry, how it made them hug their pets tighter, how it reminded them that love is eternal. Emma couldn't believe how one dog's courage had touched so many souls. One morning, a letter arrived that stood out. It was from a little boy who wrote, "Miss Emma, I used to be scared of dogs, but after reading Max's story, I adopted one. His name is Brave. Thank you for helping me find love again." As Emma read it, she broke down crying, but this time they were tears of joy. Max's legacy was alive, not just in her, but in the hearts of children and families all over the world. Years later, as Emma grew older, the lake became her favorite place to sit and reflect. Every sunset seemed to carry whispers of the past. One evening, she walked down to the shore with Hope, the golden retriever who had been by her side all these years. Hope was now old, his fur turning gray, his eyes gentle and wise. He lay down beside her, resting his head on her lap, just like Max once did. The breeze was calm, the world silent. Emma looked at the lake and said softly, "When my time comes, I hope you'll all be waiting for me. Max, Hope, all of you." The wind stirred gently, and for a brief second she saw them, faint, glowing figures by the water. Max stood in front, tail wagging slowly, his eyes full of warmth. Behind him were other dogs, their forms shining softly in the moonlight. Emma smiled through her tears. "Missed you," she whispered. The vision faded, but her heart felt light, full of peace and love. She knew that one day when her journey ended, she would run across that lake again, not as a scared little girl, but as someone returning home. And when that day finally came, the townspeople said the wind that night carried the soft sound of barking. Gentle, joyful, full of welcome. They said a golden retriever was seen standing by the lake under the moonlight before disappearing into the mist. The legend of Max lived forever, a story passed down from parents to children, reminding everyone that love never dies. It simply waits, on the other side, where loyal hearts are reunited and where no one ever has to say goodbye again.